Remember that time you finished XCOM 2 for the first time and realized that nothing else in the world would ever come close to that experience ever again? Well, Wartales won't change that. But it'll come close. From the like 500 different turn-based games that have released in 2023, Wartales easily stood out the most to me, which is kind of funny because the game isn't particularly spectacular in any shape or form. It doesn't take place in some sci-fi universe where you battle with space monsters or in a magical dragons and dungeons-like world with weird races and wizards and demons. There's none of that. If anything, it's like any other medieval type of RPG, but then without the magic and monsters. To claim that a game comes close to XCOM though, needs some backup to prove it, so let's start with the classes as they speak for themselves the most. You have warriors who can tank, rogues that deal out insane amounts of damage, and last but not least rangers who can, well, who would have thought, right? Shoot from range. No magic, no spells, no wizards, nothing like that. There's still room for some funky things like giant red brooding places and companions getting infected, turning them into feral ghouls, but don't expect to fight a dragon or anything. You'll be doing all of that with, well, obviously, turn-based combat. Whenever you are adjacent to an enemy, you engage into said combat. If you are engaged and move away from your enemy, they will attack you automatically. This is why it may be smart to dump as many points as possible in abilities that allow you to attack from a small distance. You have a plethora of options, from poisoning people, setting them on fire, waiting for them to die from environmental hazards, or simply throwing a pumpkin their way. There are a lot of status effects. The shitty thing is though that on any difficulty level above Novice, your companions will die from these the moment their health hits 0 and start a new turn. Which, sure, makes sense, but on Novice this does not happen. Higher difficulty also means that you will simply just fight more enemies. It's the same issue many games have. Higher difficulty doesn't increase the challenge, it just makes fights more tedious and longer to complete. It would have been nice to have more in-depth combat options to turn things to our liking. Every character plays to their own strength, and you'll quickly find yourself getting butchered at the start because you keep throwing companions at enemies, wondering why they die so quickly. After some trial and error, you'll figure it out though, stomping everybody that you come across. Except for archers. They tend to shoot and then run away. Just like my father. Oh, most of the fights have enormous boundaries, so you'll spend like 5 minutes chasing them. Fun times. The game is well balanced enough, but you will still quickly realize that going to a new region after having spent like plus 10 hours in one, that all of the enemies are easily still 1 or 2 or even 3 levels higher than you. And more importantly, as mentioned previously, outnumber you by quite a few men. Even animals scale up the amount of enemies, which I did not know during my first playthrough, leading to a point where my party was getting destroyed and outnumbered so often, I just started a new save file. Something that often sucks in turn-based games is that there's not much to do in the game except, well, for the combat. If the game has hub-based areas, they are often pretty empty and only used to improve your skills during fights. Wartales try to at least be innovative in this aspect, as you can teach your crew to take up certain proficiencies like cooking, fishing, tinkering and much more. It's not the most groundbreaking content ever, but it at least gives you something to do, and it's actually much needed, as hunting and cooking for your own food or crafting your own gear is much cheaper than buying everything from stores. Often with games that have a lot of crafting components, you'll feel that you don't even need like 90% of them. Wartales, however, utilizes all of it flawlessly. Poison throwing knives need comfrey that you can find in the wild, salt and fish oil that you can buy at a market, and the knives themselves that you need to craft. Bee bomblets need Osarian powder that you can buy from merchants, fangs that you can get from wild animals, and honey that you can, once again, for example, buy from a market. And the list goes on. You feel like you're constantly working towards something and that your characters are growing with you as they become more proficient in their abilities. It's not the only way the game tries to make your characters unique. Dialogue is, unfortunately, quite rare, but it is present and it almost always matches with one of the predicaments or situations you are in. Wanted level too high? Surely a companion will have Surely a companion will have an opinion about it. Success! Companion is a vegetarian? You better feed him some vegan food. Companion is traumatized by an event? Ignore it. I mean, deal with it. This is also, in all honesty, immediately the highest level of dialogue that you can expect from the game because, well, there is no story. Every region has unique situations, but they all boil down to help either this side or that side. And all of it barely makes a difference in the world or for the rewards that you get. The world kind of plays itself continuously, with merchants, bandits, and guards patrolling the world. But story-wise, there's not much there. Another example of this is when you are wanted by the law and you happen to be low on, let's say, health an armor, so you run into the hills only to realize that you're stuck there. But wait, you crafted some gear earlier that will help you descend the mountain safely so that you can make your escape without fighting. It constantly feels like you're actually going somewhere, looking for new supplies or on your way to new quests, and you actually have to manage your food, medicine and crafting supplies very narrowly. Nonetheless, whenever you've gone up and down the same road 10, 20, maybe even 500 times, it does get stale after a little while. You can speed the process up though by investing experience points, the game calls them knowledge points, they're experience points, into things like speeding up your traveling speed, being able to create better meals and crafting stronger potions. This also ties in very well with the whole moving towards something. There's no story, sure, but you honestly don't really need one as you're constantly focused on survival. And at the end of the day, isn't that what it all boils down to? I mean, this game works so well because the developers looked at the handful of mechanics that they deemed as important and made them work as flawlessly as possible, in a similar way that XCOM did. There's not a person in the world who plays XCOM for its story. You do it for survival, adapting to enemies and overcoming them with your tactics and getting weirdly attached to characters that don't even speak. There are flaws, sure, and sometimes these games can be very tedious, but they're still games that you can sink hundreds and hundreds of hours into and keep coming back to because you can tell that they were made with love. And masochism. Lots and lots of masochism.